We begin here in Nigeria, where the call for the resignation of the PDP chairman intensifies. Pressure seems to be mounting on the embattled national chairman of the People's Democratic Party, Prince Uche Secondus, as 4 national vice chairmen of the party joined others to further calls for his resignation from office. In a resolution issued last night after a meeting held in the nation's capital, Abuja, they stated that having reviewed the state of the party, they are deciding to pass the resolution asking the national chairman to resign in order to save the party from total disintegration. It doesn't seem like all is settled. The dust is yet to settle when it comes to the PDP and its internal crisis, a self-inflicted crisis.
You know, there's a mantra in war: be weary of ceasefires. Be very wary of ceasefires, because everybody thinks that when they have a ceasefire amidst the war, it will lead to, de-escalation and the potential end in the war. But historically, ceasefires have never led to the end of the war. In fact, ceasefires are very, very, very touchy scenes or scenarios in the war, because one more gunshot fired, then things go up in flame. And that's what happened over the weekend. We thought there was a ceasefire after the meeting that was held in the course of last week. We thought things had returned. Some people, deputy national officers that left said, they were going to come back. We had somebody even say, okay, I will come back to the fold. And he wrote a letter to that effect. And we thought everything was well until this meeting yesterday. And now it has shown that that ceasefire is over. Battles drawn, daggers drawn. The faction and the voices that want Uche Secondus out are louder now. We've got Dan Obi, we've got, national vice, national vice chairman across board and officers. And in fact, there's another group called the frontliners, the PDP frontliners. They are in the fold too. All of this group have come together. They've catalyzed their voice to say, okay, we want him out. Somebody would have thought that last week they had reached a resolution. And when Governor Wike came into the meeting, aired his grievance, aired his point, that things were settled. In fact, Lily Morke was on television last week, former governor of Cross River State, to say things are finally settled. And somebody would have thought that they don't want to go through what the APC is going through now. And they would have just waited till December, even if they had grounds against Uche Secondus. They could push him out in December. But now they're saying they're going bang on. They say they want him to resign. The question is, would he last? Would he survive? Will he fight back? Does he have the mettle to fight back? And we did ask a question here, from Kola Olugbodi while he was here. And we asked that, can Uche Secondus survive the earthquake of money? He laughed and he said there's no earthquake of money. Just maybe those that said the earthquake of money might be rattling the PDP, maybe their point have finally come home now to show that the onslaught is on against Uche Secondus and the money politics might be winning. Only time will tell. But it's an unfolded drama.
Dr. Batu, you have always said that the PDP must learn from history. Doesn't look like they're learning so far.
Well, in 2013, 2014, ahead of the 2015 general elections, there was a similar crisis within the party. But in that particular case, there were about 4 or 5 governors involved. We, in fact, openly staged a walkout. And, I made a point previously that affected the party in the 2015 general elections. Because also at the state and ward levels, the party was not able to put its affairs in order. So there was a crisis of leadership in terms of internal democracy. But this is slightly different, but you could have the same serious implications.
Okay.
Now it will seem to be the only person in the eye of the storm is the chairman of the party, Prince Uche Secondus. And what has happened in the last week will seem to be, the equivalent of a passing of a vote of no confidence in his leadership. The meeting last week was not in any way conclusive. In fact, not much progress was made at that meeting. And that was why the Board of Trustees decided to set up a committee to go and look at the issues involved in terms of the allegations that have been made. And that committee of the Board of Trustees is meeting tomorrow. The governors are meeting today. That's the PDP Governors Forum. Now, ahead of those 2 meetings, what has now happened yesterday is, 2 groups emerging and trying to put further pressure not just on the party or the BOT, but also on Prince Uche Secondus. And I say it is, the equivalent of the passing of a vote of no confidence in the chairman. Because now you have those deputy national chairmen from the southeast, from the south-south, from the north, saying, look, Uche Secondus must leave, must resign. Now you have the frontliners led by Alhaji Muhammad. Both groups are, making similar allegations. One, they are blaming Prince Uche Secondus for not providing leadership as a quality opposition party. They are blaming him for the defections from the party. Yes. The frontliners are saying that his leadership is too cold and aloof. They are also saying that he has not been able to carry the people along and that they cannot see what strategy he's bringing to the table. So, he's been given a bad name. I don't see how he's going to escape the hangman's noose. That is in political terms. But the question that remains, therefore, is that with this passing of a vote of no confidence in him, 7 deputy national secretaries, all the deputy national vice chairmen, only 1 deputy national secretary decided to withdraw his resignation. Okay, how many members are even in that whole national working committee? Yeah. Maybe about 21 of them. So if you put the numbers together, you have almost about, between 12 and 14 persons saying they no longer want the leadership of Prince Uche Secondus. So if the majority within the National Working Committee now appears to be against him, and then you also have, special purpose groups like the PDP frontliners, as they call themselves, then what is left for him? What is left for him is to take a decision in terms of, one, what is more important to him, the position or the future of the party? Will he be prepared to make the sacrifice that is necessary? Or are we likely to see, in the course of this week, he too rallying some other supporters? Because this is politics. You could have another group, PDP, whatever, that could come up and say this is not what they think and that they support him. But it will now be up to the owners of the party, the board of trustees of the party, to work behind the scenes to see how all of this can be resolved. And the key issue before the BOT is, should this chairman, whose tenure expires in December at the next convention, should he be allowed to stay on? The second issue is, okay, should the BOT decide that a caretaker committee should hold the party till the next convention? The third point will be, will the BOT also join the aggrieved members of the National Working Committee and also the party to now say, look, chairman of the party, you have to step down. But whatever it is, I think the larger picture should be the survival, the integrity of the party itself. I do not necessarily share the view that the problems, whatever internal democracy problems, whatever leadership problems may be within a party, can be put on the head of just one individual. Yeah. Because the party, you recall, earlier in the year had a reconciliation committee led by former Senate President Bukola Saraki. And I had raised the question, what has that reconciliation committee been able to achieve? So the problem is not just at the national level. There are also issues in many states of the federation where the party itself is divided. But easily, the People's Democratic Party, many of the persons involved, many of the stakeholders, it's convenient to blame the APC. Oh, the APC is a failed party. The APC has not done this, has not done that. But I think it's important that the major opposition party also looks inwards so that it does not repeat the mistake of 2015. That, for me, should be the priority as the party tries to sort itself out ahead of the 2023 general elections and the permutations by the major stakeholders and gladiators within the party.
Indeed, well said. And with just about a year for political parties to prepare for the next election, world congresses up to the convention and, state congresses to the topmost part of the party are by nature contentious in themselves. So can they withstand, an internal crisis and wading through all of that ahead of 2023? Time will tell, as they say. And that's all on the news headlines.
All right, we'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll have the trio of Rotus, Michael, Aaron, to give us updates on global Africa COVID-19. Stay with us, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. We'll move over to Rotus. Rotus, my friend, how are you? Good morning to you.
I'm fine, thank you. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Adesua. Good morning to all our viewers. Lots to get into, quickly get into it. Vice President Osibanjo in Nigeria has said that the African Development Bank, the AFDB, is going to contribute $500 million to tech-enabled MSMEs in Nigeria. He said this at the 33rd annual lecture, Babcock University. He said this was cost in addition to $75 billion that's been put aside by the Nigerian federal government for youth-enabled MSMEs, which are mostly in the tech sector. We know how much they mean to job creation and the engine of the economy, so very much needed there. Still in Nigeria, PwC, touched on this on Friday, we didn't get into this much. Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, who is a partner at PwC, also Dr. Andrew Nevin, who, you know, the morning show knows very well, were at a webinar where they said that the federal government should hand over the refineries to the private sector because they've basically been loss-making. You have to ask yourself this: if PwC, a global advisory firm, is saying this, that they should just hand over the refineries and not spend any money revamping them, what is the Presidential Economic Advisory Council saying? That's a question that has to be asked, and if they've been consulted at all. We move to Ghana. Ghana and the United Arab Emirates have signed an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, to waive entry visa requirements for both nations. So Ghanaian passport holders don't need to pay any get a visa when they're going into the UAE. Same thing for UAE passport holders going into Ghana. Who benefits from this? It's the UAE. We have to look at the numbers for Dubai as far as tourism is concerned. Chart number 1, Dubai's international visitors jumped by 94% from 8.4 million in 2010 to 16.3 million in 2019. You'll see a big drop in 2020 to 5.5 million. Obviously, visitors dropped because of COVID-19. Now, look at second chart. Look at Middle East and Africa, international visitors. Dubai is far and away the leader, ahead of other cities in Saudi Arabia and Africa. You notice that Johannesburg is the only sub-Saharan nation there that has a healthy number of visitors. Others, Tel Aviv in Israel, Jerusalem, and so on and so forth. Globally, how does Dubai rank? Chart number 3. They rank 4th after Bangkok, Paris, and London. This is data as of 2018. So you can see this is foreign exchange that is coming in to this nation in terms of tourism. Speaking of tourism, with respect to global visitor spending, we had $30.8 billion that Dubai received, ahead of all other cities across the globe in terms of what overnight visitors spend when coming into this particular nation, into this city compared to other global cities. And then there's a new ad that they have out right now where they've tapped Jessica Alba and Zac Efron in order to promote tourism in Dubai. So they are aiming to push tourism heavily this year. So now they've tapped Hollywood to help them out with that. We finally end with Zambia. There's an election, big election that's taking place on Thursday. President Edgar Lungu of the ruling Patriotic Front Party is facing opposition candidate Hakainde Hichilema of the United Party for National Development. Debt is looming heavily over this election with respect to the fact that Zambia owes about $13 billion in foreign debt. And there's a chart here that we have looking at their gross government debt to GDP. It's risen from 18.9% in 2010 all the way to 117% in 2020. So that election is this Thursday. Lungu has spent a lot of money on roads, infrastructure, but it has plunged the nation into debt. And don't forget, in 2020 of last year, Zambia became the first nation impacted by COVID-19 to default on a euro bond to the tune of about $42 million or so, a payment. So a lot going on this week.
All right, and that's why we make this argument about infrastructure. Really, should you build infrastructure if you don't have the money for it? Because you see this long argument that, okay, it will reflate the economy, economic activities will be boosted, things will happen quickly. It's not always that narrative. You know, if you don't set up the proper economic structure to be able to collect money, you know, from that infrastructure, or, you know, for that economic leverage to be able to make the economy produce money based on the back of that infrastructure, then nothing will happen. And I think African countries should understand that you need to create the appropriate economic models that will make that infrastructure bear fruit in the long run. So it goes back to the argument I always make that Africa is not a capitalistic economy mostly. It's right-wing socialism. It's only for a few select people that hold the ace of every economy. And when you do that, even if you build infrastructure, it's still going to benefit those few select people because they are the ones running the big factories. They are the ones, you know, plying the roads on that road you build, plying everything. And the cash still goes back to them. And it doesn't circulate in the economy. And that's exactly what happened in Zambia. It took a lot of loan, built infrastructure, but the economy did not reflect the way they wanted it. And guess who are still ruling the economy in Zambia? Are the Chinese people that have close association with the government. And it's still that big cycle of right-wing socialism. And the Chinese have benefited more for this infrastructure. They are the owners of the copper mines in Zambia. They own all the big businesses in Zambia. But an average Zambian is still poorer with all the infrastructure. And there's a big debt overhang. That's the argument.
Well, in Zambia, if the election is fair, there is no way Edgar Lungu, current president, can win. If it is an unfair election, then of course he can't lose. But how is he going to do it? He succeeded Michael Sata in 2015 and projected himself as a progressive. But at the moment he's widely unpopular among the people. The candidate of the UFND, the party of Kenneth Kaunda, you know, is doing even much better in the strongholds that Edgar Lungu can point to. And that's why I say, look, he's not likely to win. But of course, he probably has a last card that he can possibly play. He's been threatening violence. He threatens that if Hichilema, his main opposition, can win, then of course, if he wins, then he will put him in jail. That there's no doubt about that. And there's been imposition of violence, you know, by Patriotic Front cadres. And then again, Edgar Lungu is trying to seek a third term in office, technically. And, you know, that will be the first time that will happen in Zambia. And that's perhaps why this is the most highly contested election in the history of that country. Everybody is up in arms. They want Edgar Lungu out of that place. Now, all that talk about, development of infrastructure and all that, well, the people, unfortunately, are not impressed. They're talking about income inequality, increasing poverty in Zambia. They are complaining about the fact that, look, Edgar Lungu is running almost a totalitarian state. His human rights record is one of the worst in the history of that country. And then, of course, there is the issue about debt, the heavy debt that you have there. Well, okay, the third party, the third candidate that everyone is also looking at is Fred Mbembe, a former editor who set up the Socialist Party in 2018, but he probably does not stand a chance. The candidate of the UFND looks like the man that will win. But will the people be allowed to exercise their franchise? And that's why the international community must put pressure on Edgar Lungu after 2 terms. What is he looking for again? He had to amend the constitution to be able to give himself the opportunity to run for a 3rd term in office. And what is playing out in Zambia is the typical African story, whereby, even in the face of non-performance and the disenchantment of the people, African leaders insist on holding on to power. I hope we will not have a situation after August 12, whereby Zambia will join the list of African countries with sit-tight leaders. Well, we don't know yet whether that election will still hold on August 12, because one option that we're told is available to Edgar Lungu is to postpone that election or perhaps cancel the outcome. And that's why I say what is unfolding in Zambia is a typical African story. As for the MSMEs, yes, you recall that in June, July last year, under the National Economic Sustainability Program. The federal government had set aside about 2.3 trillion, what they call MSME's Survival Fund. A few weeks before then, the Central Bank of Nigeria had also introduced about 50 billion naira to support MSMEs in Nigeria, with a plan to ramp that up to about 100 billion. Now, when you were quoting the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, I think for me, the critical point he made, yesterday, was when he said we should do more research. We should try to look at the statistics. And I hope that someone, will come forward with the basic statistics in terms of what has been achieved with this National Economic Sustainability Program that the federal government of Nigeria introduced in form of a stimulus package last year. At a point, the Vice President said 300,000 businesses have benefited from it. How many have benefited now? And finally, it's very sad that the United Arab Emirates is giving a free visa-free access to Ghana. And Nigeria, I'm sure we have a higher volume of visitors to the UAE almost on a daily basis. And yet, it is Ghana that has gone there to sign a memorandum of understanding with benefits for the ordinary or the business-minded or the diplomat from Ghana.
I mean, isn't it surprising that Ghana gets it all these days? Very, very painful stuff, right? I'd like to say a very big thank you to you, Rotus, as always, for your time. We'll move on to business update, more business update with Michael Wilson, just from London now. Michael, great to have you. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, so an interesting conundrum really after those blockbuster US jobs figures on Friday, and also I'm going to come on to this, but the fact that will the Chinese economy now get a boost from government stimulus there? These two things are really continuing to make markets wonder. Plus, of course, we've got COVID concerns over COVID in the background, which I'm sure you will be discussing later on in the program. So let's talk about Asian markets first of all. I was talking about China. Basically, they had good trade figures there as far as exports are concerned, but the worry is the imports, which plunged. I put that sort of in inverted commas because we wouldn't mind this too much, which rose by only, again in inverted commas, 28%. It was expected to be 33%. So again, if imports are falling, it tends to indicate that the strength of the internal economy is not what people would actually like it to be, and inflation figures are fairly flat there. So the Shanghai Composite up about 1%, Hong Kong, the Hang Seng up just over 1% this morning. But again, everything really on when now the Fed will begin to taper its quantitative easing. That seems to be getting closer, although we haven't had any strong hints about that so far. But I think the jobs figures on Friday will push the Fed towards doing something. Don't feel sorry for them too much, but China's tech tycoons have been hit by the crackdown. 87 billion pounds off their private fortunes, including Pony Ma from Tencent and also Colin Huang from Pinduoduo. Even Jack Ma's fortune fallen by 2.6 million over the same period. A lot more, of course, since that IPO was pulled late last year. Alibaba is going to sack one of its managers who apparently has been accused of sexual misconduct, of rape. That apparently after a drunken night of celebration. There's more on that, but it's an interesting thing that the Chinese authorities are clearly allowing this kind of their clampdown on this kind of behaviour to become public. Let's recap what happened in the United States. Those bump figures basically on Friday surprised, delighted those, of course, who like a strong US economy, but pushed the Fed further into wondering about when inflation and price rises are actually going to go. I must share this with you, that actually there are many, many more jobs looking for workers than are being supplied in the United States. So that means that a lot of people are still staying at home supported by furlough. Dow Jones, therefore, NASDAQ and the rest of it in record territory. You're probably rather tired of me hearing me say that, but that's the way things are going at the moment. Wall Street riding particularly high on all sorts of aspirations and all sorts of corporate results. We saw some very strong ones last week. Warren Buffett's fund, Berkshire Hathaway, is riding the recovery. He's invested in energy, from energy to railroads and the rest of it, and he's betting very much on the economy reopening as it is in the United States. He's also buying back a lot of shares as well. Remember, he's chairman, not CEO now, of Berkshire Hathaway, and the company has repurchased $6 billion worth of its own stock. So it's got a big cash pile to go forward. Saudi Aramco, here's a big one. Saudi state-owned giant has tripled its profit, a stunning 288% increase in net income. Lots of projections there about the way in which oil is going to be more and more in demand as recovery increases. Not so much a green agenda from them, as you'd expect. I'll come on to what that's meant for the oil price later on. And speaking of that sort of recovery, global construction companies are predicting a construction supercycle. Now, I don't need to tell you, given Dangote and the rest of it, what that means for things like the concrete industry. The largest cement company in the world is Holcim, and he says that the CEO that this boom will continue for years. And this is clearly based on the fact that lots of developed countries like the United States, like the UK, like lots in Europe, and indeed lots of African countries are pledging infrastructure increases as the pandemic, we hope, recedes. Philip Morris has raised, ironic this, isn't it, raised its bid for a respiratory drug maker. It's Vectura rather. It was Carlyle had bid for it. Now Philip Morris has come back in again. European markets opening fairly flat, really. Nothing too much to worry about there, but they're still, I think, got their thinking caps on about what this fall in China's predicted imports probably means, and we're going to see that through the session as well. No surprise here within the UK. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor are clashing over spending plans. The Prime Minister, who's basically a politician, is saying that he wants to spend more on infrastructure and all the rest of it, NHS. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, of course, with his hands very tightly on the purse strings, is worried about inflation and rising interest rates. That's a political battle which is continuing. Sir Richard Branson, this is news basically from Saturday and Friday, really, but it's worth mentioning this morning. Virgin Atlantic is supposed to be exploring an IPO in London. It's not doing well, as all airlines aren't, and this is hoped it may well save it slightly. Virgin Group owns 51%. The other bit is owned by Delta. We'll see how that comes. And the UK has ordered a probe into COVID tests. I can speak out of horrible personal experience about this, that if you go abroad here, you have to come back and be tested privately, and it can be very expensive indeed. A lot of people have been saying over the weekend this is in fact acting as a tax, so that only the richer amongst us can actually afford to go abroad for holidays. This is something which is completely the law of unintended consequences, really, as far as COVID's concerned. We're having had these private tests. This can cost up to about £100 and a lot more if you want them quickly. Very quickly, oil has recovered very slightly, but still slightly worried about China's imports. However, let me just requoting more from Aramco. They say that their expectation is the recovery will continue. We expect year-end demand will be about 99 million barrels a day, up to about 100 million barrels maybe for total demand. And gold, well, obviously, as you'd expect, given the extraordinary rise in those jobs figures in the United States, and thus feelings about interest rate rises, gold has declined very slightly. We're talking about maybe about 1750 an ounce to 1800 within that kind of price range. That's your global view this morning.
Well, Michael, I wanted to get your thoughts on diversity targets. Last week, the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK was talking about guidelines for companies in the UK to ensure that a certain percentage of representation in boards go to women, sexual minorities, and also to persons of non-white racial categorization. And just about Friday, NASDAQ in the US was also saying that companies that are listed on NASDAQ must also ensure diversity. least one woman on the board, and at least one person that could be, of transgender or, any other category who are considered minorities. How far do you think that will go in ensuring diversity in boardrooms, considering the fact that while the Democrats are hailing it, the Republicans are saying, look, this is like prescribing for business a one-size-fits-all. And then quickly, you talked about the clash between the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak. Any chance that Rishi Sunak could be demoted to become Health Secretary, particularly that he is saying that government should ease travel restrictions? Or is that meant as a joke?
Can't comment on the political stuff because I'm not a political commentator. I think it would be a shame if Rishi Sunak were put over to health and so on. I think, for what it's worth, I think he's doing a reasonable job as Chancellor. It's very difficult. It's no surprise ever in this country that there's a clash between number 10, where the Prime Minister lives, or official residence on Downing Street, and number 11, where the Chancellor lives, next door. A little bit of overlap in the properties and a lot of overlap as far as policies are concerned. But always you have a Prime Minister who's pressing to spend, believes now in the money tree apparently, and Rishi Sunak doesn't. I feel as though it would send out the wrong signals, particularly as the Bank of England, as we talked about last week, is battling with its reputation to say, have we really got our eye on the ball as far as inflation and the rest of it's concerned? Everything is fine provided there's confidence in government and a confidence in a central bank. If you're pushing away at that, anything erodes that, then it's a self-fulfilling tragedy, as you know, and we saw it in mid-war Germany. As soon as the markets start to send weakness in a currency and in corporate governance, then they're in there like sharks. So that really is a worry. It looks like a political row right now. I have to say that we talk about the Westminster bubble in this country. Are the people of the UK particularly bothered about these political rows, or are they more bothered about survival after the pandemic? I would suggest the latter. As far as diversity is concerned, it is one size fits all. It will have a lot to do because shareholders are having to bow to this agenda, whether they like it or not. I'm not necessarily sure that it makes business any better. I mean, or rather makes stock exchanges and access to equity any more easy if you have diversity. I don't know the answer to that. I can see what's happening. Companies will have to adopt it. Apparently, according to the NASDAQ authorities, according to the SEC on Friday, which you were talking about, if this were applied to companies on the NASDAQ right now, 75% of them would be outside those kind of expectations. So there's a long way to go. Whether it makes for better money coming from Wall Street to Main Street, which is what it's got to be about, and also about promoting better economy, I really don't know the answer to it, but I can see it happening.
Okay, I just wanted to ask you about your thoughts on China. It would seem no one or no sector is immune from those sudden policy changes and crackdown. How's this going to affect investors' confidence, in your own opinion? Or is it affecting at all?
It's a question which we addressed last week, didn't we? Talking about many more companies being warned about regulatory risk as far as China's concerned. Nobody knows what's going on in China. It's very, very difficult to read at the moment. I quoted you how much those people have lost out of their personal fortunes. We don't care about them. What we care about is basically an approachment with China to make sure that this clearly growing economy acts by the rest of the rules that we actually know about. I mean, we believe in capitalism because that's the way of life. How China actually measures up to that is a cause for concern. Is it stopping people investing in China? Probably not. People have always taken risk on board. The problem is that this on the one hand and on the other hand kind of regulatory regime that China is advancing at the moment is very, very difficult to second guess. That is the worry. So yes, there are worries. Risk, well, you got to take risks.
Michael, this might not be exciting times for English companies because is it that the companies are that cheap? Americans are making a run for them. You can see what is happening with the Morrison deal. Now Philip Morris wants to buy another British company. Watchers say this is the highest number of purchases by the Americans on British companies in 20 years. So almost every British company, an American is looking at it and he wants to buy it. Is it because they are dirt cheap? What is happening? Now, most of these companies are quoted on the FTSE 100 or the FTSE 250.
So the Americans are looking, as they always do, at cheaper companies around the world. That's what private equity does. That's what you employ private equity companies to do. Over the weekend, though, it was interesting that a lot of the financial pages were coming up with the following story, which is that why don't companies like, for example, Sainsbury's, which is a big supermarket, take over smaller supermarkets, which must be cheap? Answer to
Okay, unfortunately, we lost a connection there with Michael. Thank you so much, Michael Wilson, for the global business outlook for today.